The mansion glittered like a jewel against the dark sky. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light onto marble floors, and the air was rich with the scent of roses flown in from another continent. Outside, expensive cars lined the driveway in neat rows, each one worth more than the houses most people in the city lived in. It was the night of Ethan Reynolds' annual gala, a night where the wealthiest, most powerful, and most admired gathered under one roof. Inside, the ballroom hummed with music and laughter. Women in gowns that shimmered like waterfalls clutched glasses of champagne, their diamonds flashing under the lights. Men in sleek tuxedos boasted of their latest ventures and victories, their voices laced with pride. Waiters in spotless uniforms floated around with trays of hors d'oeuvres so delicate they looked like art. Everything was perfect, controlled, untouchable, until the music faltered. It wasn't the instruments that stopped, it was the mood, the rhythm of the room, interrupted by something no one could have expected. At the entrance stood a young woman. Her hair, tangled and dull, hung around her face in loose strands. Her dress was threadbare, a washed-out fabric that clung to her frail frame. She was barefoot, her toes red from the cold marble of the grand steps. But it was not her appearance alone that startled the guests, it was the bundle in her arms. A baby. The infant whimpered weakly, its little lips cracked, its eyes half closed with exhaustion. The sound was so faint it should have been lost under the music, but somehow, it pierced straight through the clamor of wealth and laughter. The woman's name was Clara. At 21, she had lived a life few in that ballroom could imagine. Her parents had died young, leaving her to fend for herself. With no inheritance, no education, and no one to guide her, she had stumbled through life's shadows, clinging to any scrap of survival. She had loved once, naively, only to be abandoned when she revealed she was carrying a child. Since then, her days had been a series of struggles, odd jobs that paid too little, nights spent in shelters when luck permitted, on park benches when it didn't. That night, Clara hadn't come seeking riches, food, or sympathy. She hadn't even known who owned the dazzling mansion when she wandered up the long drive. All she knew was that her baby, her little Lily, hadn't had a drop of clean water all day. Clara's own milk had dried from stress and hunger. Her daughter's tiny body had grown hot and limp in her arms. She had whispered prayers to the night sky, begging for help, and when the mansion's glow appeared, she followed it like a lost traveler follows a lighthouse. The security guards at the gate had hesitated, unsure how to handle her. She wasn't aggressive, just desperate. Before they could stop her, she slipped past and found herself standing in the entrance of a world she did not belong to. "Miss, you can't be here," one of the guards said sharply, moving toward her. Clara hugged Lily tighter and lifted her chin, though her knees shook. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My baby, she just needs water." Her words were not loud, but they silenced the room more effectively than any shout. The violinists faltered, the chatter stilled, and dozens of eyes turned toward her. Some widened with shock, others narrowed with disdain. "She shouldn't be here," a woman in pearls muttered. "Is this some kind of trick?" Another man scoffed. "Security, get her out," someone else hissed. Clara's cheeks burned, her throat tight with humiliation. Every instinct told her to flee, but Lily stirred weakly in her arms, her dry lips opening in a silent cry. Clara swallowed her pride and stood her ground. Then, a new figure stepped into view. From the grand staircase descended Ethan Reynolds himself. Tall, impeccably dressed in a black suit, with the calm, commanding presence of a man who never had to ask twice for anything. He was known across the city as a titan of business, sharp, relentless, untouchable. To the guests, he was both idol and intimidator. To Clara, he was simply another rich man whose eyes she would meet only once, if at all. The crowd parted instinctively as he approached. His expression was unreadable, his gaze fixed on Clara. When he stopped in front of her, the contrast between them was unbearable. He, polished and composed, she, barefoot, trembling, clutching her baby as if the child were her last breath of life. Clara's voice cracked as she spoke. I'm sorry to disturb your party. I just need water for my baby." The silence deepened. Everyone waited for Ethan's response. Surely, he would have her escorted out. This was his night, his kingdom, his stage. But Ethan did something no one expected. "Bring water," he said. His voice was calm but carried an authority that made people jump. A waiter rushed forward with a crystal glass, but Ethan shook his head. "Not that. Clean, boiled, cooled water. In a bottle." His eyes flicked toward his butler, who vanished toward the kitchen. Clara blinked, stunned. Relief and disbelief tangled inside her. Ethan's gaze returned to her. Up close, his eyes weren't as cold as she had imagined. They were sharp, yes, but there was a glimmer there, something that looked almost like recognition. "You're trembling," he said quietly. He slipped off his tailored jacket and placed it gently over her shoulders. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan Reynolds, who never let anyone close enough to wrinkle his suit, was now draping it over a barefoot stranger. When the butler returned with a sterilized bottle of water, Clara's hands shook as she took it. She guided it to Lily's lips, and the baby latched desperately, drinking as if life itself had been poured into her. Clara's tears fell freely as she whispered, "Thank you, thank you." The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some were touched, others suspicious. A few whispered about publicity stunts. But Ethan ignored them all. "What's your name?" he asked. "Clara," she answered, wiping her cheeks. "And your baby?" "Lily." He was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice that carried across the marble hall, he said, "Look closely, all of you. This is what true need looks like. Not the kind we negotiate in boardrooms, not the kind solved with profit margins. A child nearly fainting for lack of water, while we sip wine worth more than her mother could earn in a year." The room fell silent. Some guests lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others looked restless, as though wishing to escape. Ethan's gaze swept over them. "We measure success by the wrong standards. Tonight, I promise this will change. From this day forward, my foundation will dedicate itself to mothers and children in need. No child in this city should ever beg for water." A ripple of murmurs spread. Some clapped hesitantly, others stared in shock. No one could deny that the moment had shifted something in the room. Then Ethan turned back to Clara. "And you," he said gently, "you and Lily will not return to the streets tonight. You'll stay here, in the guest wing. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next." Clara's lips parted, her body trembling with disbelief. "Sir, I can't accept." "You can," he interrupted softly. "And you will." For the first time in years, Clara felt a strange, fragile thing stirring in her chest. Hope. The gala resumed eventually, but its glitter had dimmed. The guests would leave that night with a story they would tell for years, not of the wealth, the gowns, or the music, but of the barefoot girl who stepped into a CEO's gala asking only for water, and the man who gave her far more than she dreamed. And for Ethan Reynolds, the ruthless tycoon, the night marked a turning point. Because in one young mother's trembling plea, he had rediscovered something greater than power, the simple, undeniable humanity that binds them all. The mansion sparkled like a palace under the night sky. Chandeliers glittered through vast windows, and the grand staircase glowed with golden light. Cars worth fortunes lined the driveway, their polished bodies reflecting the glow of camera flashes. This was the night of Ethan Reynolds' legendary gala, an event whispered about for weeks in the city, where only the wealthiest, most powerful, and most admired received invitations. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with music and laughter. Waiters floated gracefully, trays balanced with champagne and hors d'oeuvres too delicate for ordinary appetites. Women shimmered in sequined gowns, their jewels catching the light. Men in tailored tuxedos exchanged stories of business conquests and political connections. The room was alive with the smug rhythm of privilege. Yet outside the gates, just beyond the glittering lights, a very different rhythm pulsed, the weak, pitiful whimper of a baby. Clara shifted her daughter, Lily, higher against her shoulder. The child's cheeks were flushed, her lips dry and cracked. Clara rocked her gently, whispering, "Hold on, sweetheart. Just hold on a little longer." At 21, Clara already looked far older. Her once bright eyes had dimmed with exhaustion, and her thin frame told of nights skipped in hunger so her baby could eat. She had lost her parents as a teenager, lost her partner when she became pregnant, and lost her home when the bills piled too high. Life had stripped her of many things, comfort, stability, even dignity, but it had not taken her love for her daughter. That evening, Clara had walked aimlessly through the city, searching desperately for a kind soul, for water, for anything to soothe Lily's cries. She had seen the glow of the mansion from blocks away and followed it, clinging to one thought: if anyone has what I need, it's in there. The gates loomed tall, but desperation pushed her forward. She slipped past the distracted guards and stepped onto the red carpet. Murmurs rippled instantly among the guests. A barefoot girl in a faded dress, clutching a baby, had no place among their diamonds and silk. "Miss, you can't be here," a guard said sharply. Clara hugged Lily tighter, her voice trembling. "Please, my baby needs water. Just water." Her words were soft but carried through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The musicians faltered. Conversations stopped. Eyes turned, brows furrowed, lips curled. "She's ruining the party," someone muttered. "Is this a scam?" Another scoffed. "She needs to be escorted out immediately." Clara's cheeks burned, but she stayed. Lily whimpered weakly, her tiny body limp with thirst. Clara swallowed her pride, tears stinging her eyes. She would bear every cruel stare if it meant saving her child. And then, from the grand staircase, a figure descended. Ethan Reynolds, the billionaire CEO, admired by many and feared by more, cut an imposing figure in his black suit. Known for ruthless deals and unshakable composure, he was the kind of man who owned the room simply by entering it. The crowd parted instinctively as he approached, waiting to see how he would crush this disruption. Clara's breath caught. She felt like a trespasser before a king. But when Lily whimpered again, Clara summoned the courage to whisper, "Sir, I'm sorry to disturb your party. I just need water for my baby." The entire room held its breath. Part 2. The CEO's answer, approximately 750 words. For a long, unbearable moment, Ethan said nothing. His gray eyes studied Clara and the fragile bundle in her arms. The silence was so sharp that even the baby's faint whimpers sounded deafening. Guests leaned closer, eager to see how the billionaire would deal with such an intrusion. And then Ethan spoke. "Bring water," he ordered. His tone was calm but firm, a voice used to being obeyed instantly. A waiter rushed forward with a crystal glass filled with sparkling water. Ethan shook his head. "Not that. Clean, boiled, cooled water. In a bottle." He turned toward his butler, who immediately hurried to the kitchen. The crowd buzzed in disbelief. Some laughed nervously, others frowned. Ethan Reynolds, the untouchable tycoon, was indulging a beggar. Clara blinked, overwhelmed. She whispered, "Thank you," but Ethan wasn't finished. "You're trembling," he observed quietly. Without hesitation, he removed his tailored jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Gasps swept the room. Ethan Reynolds, who was said to value image above all, had just covered a barefoot stranger with his own jacket. The butler returned minutes later with a sterilized bottle of water. Clara's hands shook as she accepted it, guiding it gently to Lily's lips. The baby latched eagerly, sucking as though life itself had been returned. Clara wept silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was so thirsty, she murmured. Ethan's eyes softened. He turned to the watching guests, his voice carrying through the hall. "You see this? A child nearly fainting for lack of water, while we sip wine worth more than her mother could earn in a year." Uneasy silence filled the ballroom. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others crossed their arms, unwilling to be moved. Ethan continued, "We speak of wealth, of progress, of success. But what good is any of it if we ignore the simplest human need? If one child can suffer this way, in our city, then all of this," he gestured to the chandeliers, the gowns, the feast, "is meaningless." The words struck deeper than the guests wanted to admit. For the first time that night, no one laughed or boasted. Ethan turned back to Clara. "What's your name?" "Clara," she whispered. "And your baby?" "Lily." Ethan nodded once, decisively. Then he spoke not just to her, but to everyone. "From tonight, my foundation will launch a permanent fund for mothers and children in need. No child in this city should ever beg for water again." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some clapped tentatively, others exchanged skeptical glances, but all knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Then Ethan did something even more shocking. He faced Clara directly. "And you will not return to the streets tonight. You and Lily will stay here, in the guest wing. Tomorrow, we will discuss how to change your situation permanently." Clara's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. His tone left no room for argument, yet his eyes held a gentleness that made Clara's chest ache with relief. For the first time in years, she felt the flicker of hope. Not pity, not charity, but hope. The gala resumed eventually, but the glitter was dimmed. Guests would leave that night telling the story of the barefoot girl who entered a billionaire's gala asking only for water, and the man who gave her far more than she imagined. And for Ethan Reynolds, the night marked a turning point. The ruthless CEO discovered in Clara's trembling plea a truth he had long forgotten. Power meant nothing without compassion, and humanity was the only wealth that truly endured.